which is about unemployment and immigration. Aileen Kennedy, is Aileen here? Aileen, do you want to read out your question? And
my specific question is if they continue with the cuts over the next few years, they're going to ruin this economy and they're going to drive thousands and thousands of people out of this
So you're saying cutting public spending just isn't the way?
Yeah,
so
and also the fact that with the likes of, cutting the public sector workers of 30,000 by Fine Gael, and I know Fianna Fáil and Labour are also talking about, this natural wastage. There's an embargo on the HSC, which is one of the reasons I couldn't get a job. And so if you continue with this embargo, and continue not to put people first in this country, we will end up...
Okay, well, I'm going to go to Michael Mulcahy first, and I'll go to Ruairi.
Just firstly on the public service, firstly, of course, the Croke Park Agreement was done by the outgoing government. It wasn't accepted by all the parties, the other parties, but now they appear to have accepted it, except for Fine Gael. And under the Croke Park Agreement, this is what my party is committed to. There is no compulsory redundancy in the public service. I don't think that's what Fine Gael are saying. Fine Gael are saying 30 to 40,000 will go, and implied in that kind of numbers, in my view, you're talking about some forced redundancies. But I want to come back just to the key question, which is a very important question you asked about employment. That is the number of jobs. It is the number one issue for everybody. And here's a question I want to pose, and I'll answer it myself, but I want to ask it first. How will this country have long-term sustainable employment? And the answer to that question is long-term sustainable employment. The answer is by having an efficient economy where we can sell our goods and services in Ireland and abroad. We export over 80% of what we produce. By having an economy that is efficient and competitive.
Okay. As I've mentioned before, we have said we'll reduce the public sector by 30,000. The reason for that is that the country can't afford the current size of the public sector in terms of balancing the books. That fundamental housekeeping, that will be done within the confines of voluntary redundancies and within the confines of the Croke Park Agreement. That is the plan. In terms of wealth,
so you're really
excuse me, where wealth is generated is by the private sector, is by exports. This country lost its way from the year 2000. Charlie McCreevy, Bertie and Byrne, Brian Cowan created an artificial property boom of biblical proportions, which essentially Anglo-Irish Bank pulled this country over the edge, into bankruptcy.
Last year was a record year for Irish exports.
That is why we are where we are. So we need to get back to basics, which Fine Gael understand, which is about enterprises, small enterprises that employ 8 to 10 people. That's where most people actually work.
We are now a bankrupt country. Fianna Fáil and the Greens have bankrupt this country. That nobody we cannot borrow money from any bondholder to pay our public services. Our income stream is vastly below our expenditure from tax, with the result that the IMF, and you'll see they're monitoring the deal that they have done with the Fianna Fáil government. We must get our public spending down, and we have to conform to the 3% GDP ratio on borrowings. It's a crisis. It's going to be a major job in turning this country around. We recognise the need for creating employment because with the austerity measures, which promised growth of 1.7%, has now been revised by the central bank to show that the potential growth this year will be 0.5%. Any economy needs a minimum of 5% growth, and we must therefore create jobs, intensify the incentives to employment. We must create, in our case, a strategic employment bank that's going to target what we call shovel-ready projects to kickstart the economy. It's frightening, quite frankly, and I'm delighted you've been reassured by some of your spokespersons that all the cuts are going to be reversed. But I think a little bit of honesty, Mike, when you look at the stark reality of the state of this country, we are in a very, very precarious situation, and we're about to rebuild the nation. We are about to become the second layer of patriots who built this nation. It It was built on its independence in 22. The country is now in ruins, and we have to try and rebuild from a bankrupt basis into the future.
I think the reality, the voluntary redundancies that a lot of big parties talk about are what they call natural wastage. Now, we all know what that looks like on the ground. It's not replacing key frontline staff in much needed services in the community. And the second thing, talking about, the manufacturing industry, we need to support it. We don't have enough money in our pockets with our falling incomes and cuts in social welfares to keep the jobs going. And the reality of it is that prices, was mentioned about our wages are so high compared to the rest of Europe. They don't have prices like we do. They don't have mortgages like we do, and they don't have rents, etc. So it's not comparing like with like. We are where we are, and we have to have an income that makes it possible for us to live a decent and reasonable lifestyle.
All right,
It's quite interesting how it's German and French money that's at risk of losing. And if Ireland reneges on this deal, France and German economies down the tube. The German, billions and billions of German money is invested in our banks and it's gone bang. And we're expecting you and me and our children, our grandchildren to pay this back. Well, I voted against Maastricht and Lisbon, but we were told by Europe, you must go again, don't be silly, and voted again, and don't stop voting until you get it right. And we did it, and we're all good European citizens. It's very, very funny how now we're a little island in the middle of the Irish Sea, and this is an Irish problem. It's German money, and it's French money, it's European money, it's European financing mistakes of the euro that's caused this calamity in this country, and yet we're all on our own now as a little country like Ireland, and you and me and everybody else is going to pay back Germany and France. Well, I didn't vote for that. Maastricht and Lisbon was all about being Europe. This is a European problem, and Europe better fix it, but we're not going to fix it.
There's something badly wrong, and again, it's our system. Because interestingly, in history, if you do history in school, they refer to the safety valve of emigration. Now, who's it a safety valve for? It's a safety valve for the elite at the top, the rubbish at the top of this country that simply don't care about anyone but themselves. So to see it happening again, I think is shocking, it's disgraceful, and I want to know, where's my guarantee that this is it, this is the final time that this country messes up. Can I throw one suggestion at you for jobs? I've been very interested in what happened just across the North Atlantic in Iceland, and what they did was, first of all, they refused to bail out the banks. The people said no, they messed up, we're not bailing them out, and bloody good luck to them. And secondly, the new government replaced the old government. The heads of the old Icelandic government are going to go on trial for economic treason, and I think that's what a real democracy looks like. And then they organised 6,000 citizens around the country in 20-25 centres to sit down and come up with new ideas. Because the new ideas in this election aren't coming from the established parties, they're coming largely from the independents. Let's have something similar to Ireland. Some new ideas and some fresh thinking.
I think the real question is here, do we bail out the speculators and the banks who have brought us to the state we're in and that this government has allowed to happen, or do we protect the people? Now, this, as I said earlier on, there's 10 billion sitting there saying that Fianna Fáil would not allow go to the bank. It's from the National Pension Reserve Fund. For every 1 billion spent, this is from the Department of Finance, for every 1 billion spent in creating jobs, you create about 12,000 jobs. Now, I don't, and the People for Profit Alliance don't believe that the private sector can create jobs at the moment. There's no money there. And we have to go back to looking at how the state can stimulate jobs. If we put 5 billion into stimulating jobs, 10 billion, United Union are calling for 15 billion stimulus into jobs. And that's where everything starts changing, because there was a point made earlier on by Michael Mulcahy that there's something like a 20 billion deficit. That's, in 2007 there was 55 billion coming in taxes, now there's only 30 billion. That's where the difference is. So if you had people back at work, you'd cut that deficit immediately, and you would be looking at that problem. So that's why it's really, but we're arguing that it has to be an immediate stimulation of jobs in the economy, and there's no other way around it. If we don't, the economy's going down.
Thank you.
You have a challenge. If you vote for those parties who are willing to bail out banks at a huge rate, basically put taxpayers' money into a black hole, or you invest that money in jobs. If you have a stimulus package, which has happened in many other countries, you create jobs. You can create jobs at a level which will stop the emigration from Ireland. And there are key sectors that Ireland can still compete in the world without undermining the paying condition. And there are key jobs that can be created which would protect our public service and also give better public service, and that includes the construction industry, building schools and building hospitals, which are much needed. And much of the money that comes when you invest in that type of employment, in particular in construction, it comes back in the form of the tax that you charge of those workers. So the state regains it quite quickly.